Jake Morrison wiped the sweat from his forehead as he checked the cargo manifest one more time. The medical supplies were secure in the lower hold, and the food rations filled every available space in his ship. 20 years of running cargo between Earth and the outer colonies had taught him to use every inch of storage space. His ship, the New Horizon, was not the biggest vessel in space, but she was reliable and fast when she needed to be. The mining colony on Kepler 442b was struggling. Again, the quarterly supply run was their lifeline, and Jake knew that families depended on what he carried in his hold. Children needed medicine, workers needed food, and the colony needed hope that Earth had not forgotten them. Jake had made this run 17 times before, and each time he saw the relief in people's faces when he arrived with supplies. He finished his pre-flight checks and settled into the pilot's chair. The navigation computer showed a clear path through the neutral zone between human and Zephyrian space. The journey would take 4 days through hyperspace and another day of normal flight to reach the colony. Jake had traveled this route so many times he could fly it with his eyes closed. The New Horizon lifted off from the cargo station orbiting Mars and headed toward the hyperspace jump point. Jake watched Earth grow smaller in his rear display until it was just another star among millions. He had been born on that blue world 45 years ago, but space had become his real home. Out here among the stars, a man could make an honest living hauling cargo and helping people survive on distant worlds. Jake engaged the hyperspace drive and felt the familiar sensation of reality bending around his ship. The stars stretched into lines of light, and then everything went dark except for the soft glow of his instruments. 4 days in hyperspace gave him time to read, exercise, and maintain his ship. It was peaceful work that suited him perfectly. On the 3rd day, alarms started screaming throughout the ship. Jake rushed to the engine room and found coolant leaking from the hyperspace drive. The temperature gauges were climbing toward the red zone, and he could smell the sharp odor of overheated metal. He shut down the drive immediately and dropped back into normal space. The New Horizon drifted in the empty darkness between stars. Jake ran a full diagnostic on the engine systems and found the problem. A coolant pump had failed, and the backup system was also damaged. Without repairs, he could not restart the hyperspace drive. He was stranded in the neutral zone, hundreds of light years from the nearest human outpost. Jake suited up and went outside to examine the engine housing. The pump could be repaired, but he needed parts from his spare inventory and at least 6 hours of careful work. He had done this kind of repair before, but never in deep space with no backup nearby. Still, he had no choice but to try. He was halfway through the repair when his proximity alarms activated. Jake looked up from his work and saw something that made his blood run cold. A massive Zephyrian warship was decloaking less than a kilometer away. The vessel was 5 times the size of his cargo hauler, with weapons that could reduce the New Horizon to atoms in seconds. Jake had never seen a Zephyrian ship this close before. The hull was dark gray with angular designs that looked like the skeleton of some ancient predator. Weapon ports lined the sides like rows of teeth, and sensor arrays swept back and forth like searching eyes. This was a dreadnought, one of the most powerful ships in the Zephyrian fleet. He scrambled back inside his ship and sealed the airlock. His hands shook as he tried to power up the weapon systems. But the New Horizon was a cargo vessel with only basic defensive systems. Against a Zephyrian dreadnought, his weapons would be as effective as throwing rocks at a mountain. The communication system crackled to life, and a harsh voice spoke in broken human language. "Human vessel, you will surrender immediately. Prepare to be boarded. Resistance will result in your destruction." Jake had heard stories about what happened to humans who were captured by Zephyrians. The reptilian aliens considered humans to be inferior creatures suitable only for slavery or scientific experimentation. No human had ever been taken alive by the Zephyrians and returned to tell about it. "This is Captain Jake Morrison of the independent vessel New Horizon," he replied. "I am in neutral space conducting lawful cargo operations. You have no authority to board my ship." The alien voice laughed, a sound like grinding metal. "Authority comes from strength, human. You have neither. Submit now or be destroyed." Jake looked at his options. He could try to run, but his hyperspace drive was broken. He could fight, but his weapons were useless against a warship. He could surrender and hope for mercy from creatures that had never shown mercy to anyone. Instead, he did what any sensible human would do when faced with impossible odds. He activated his emergency beacon and transmitted everything he knew about his location and situation back to human space. The quantum signal would take weeks to reach Earth, but at least someone would know what happened to him. "I will not surrender to aliens who treat humans like animals," Jake said into the communicator. "If you want my ship, you'll have to take it." The response was immediate. Energy beams lanced out from the dreadnought and disabled his engines and weapon systems. The New Horizon went dark except for emergency power, and Jake felt the ship shake as boarding pods attached to his hull. He grabbed a plasma rifle from the emergency locker and took position behind the cargo containers in his hold. If the Zephyrians wanted him alive, they would have to work for it. The airlock exploded inward and armored figures poured through the breach. The Zephyrians were tall and lean, with scaly green skin and yellow eyes that glowed in the darkness. They carried energy weapons that hummed with power, and their armor was covered with spikes and sharp edges. Jake had seen pictures of them before, but facing them in person was different. These were predators that had conquered 17 star systems and enslaved countless worlds. Jake fired his rifle and watched the plasma bolt splash harmlessly against alien armor. The Zephyrians returned fire with weapons that sent waves of paralysis through his body. He collapsed behind the cargo containers, unable to move but still conscious. 2 Zephyrians grabbed him and dragged him toward the boarding pod. Jake tried to speak, to curse them or threaten them, but his vocal cords would not work. The paralysis weapon had left him helpless, but aware of everything happening around him. They carried him aboard the dreadnought and threw him into a cell that stank of fear and death. As the door sealed shut, Jake heard the sound of explosions outside. The Zephyrians were destroying his ship, erasing the last trace of his presence in this empty region of space. But they had made one mistake. They did not know about the quantum beacon that had already sent his location and biometric data racing toward Earth at faster than light speed. Somewhere in human space, that signal was bouncing from relay station to relay station, carrying news that would change everything. Jake Morrison was no longer just a cargo pilot. He had become the first human prisoner ever taken by the Zephyrian Empire. And when Earth learned what had happened to one of their own, the galaxy would discover what humans were truly capable of when their family was threatened. Admiral Lisa Kane was reviewing fleet readiness reports when the priority alert flashed across her command screen. She had been expecting routine cargo manifests and patrol updates, not an emergency quantum transmission from deep space. The signal had bounced through 17 relay stations over 3 weeks, carrying data that made her blood freeze in her veins. The transmission contained biometric readings, location coordinates, and a final message from Captain Jake Morrison of the cargo vessel New Horizon. Kane had never heard of Morrison before, but the data told a story that every human would soon know by heart. A single human had been captured by the Zephyrian Empire, the first prisoner ever taken by the reptilian aliens in their 1,000 years of conquest. Kane immediately forwarded the transmission to President Daniel Hayes and called an emergency meeting of the Earth Defense Council. Within 2 hours, The most powerful people in human space were gathered in the secure conference room beneath the Colorado mountains. The weight of the moment pressed down on everyone present as they watched the data playback on the main screen. President Hayes studied the biometric readings with growing anger. The data showed that Morrison was alive, but in severe distress. His heart rate was elevated, his brain activity showed signs of extreme stress, and chemical markers in his blood indicated he was being subjected to unknown drugs or toxins. Whatever the Zephyrians were doing to him, it was not pleasant. Doctor Amanda Cross, Earth's leading expert on alien biology, explained what the readings meant in terms that made everyone in the room uncomfortable. The Zephyrians were known for their scientific curiosity about other species, but their methods were brutal and often fatal. They viewed other intelligent life forms as laboratory specimens to be studied, dissected, and discarded when no longer useful. Based on what we know about Zephyrian research methods, Dr. Cross said, Morrison is likely being subjected to physical and psychological torture designed to test human limits. They will want to understand our biology, our pain tolerance, and our mental breaking points. If we do nothing, he will eventually die from their experiments. General Marcus Webb, commander of all Terran military forces, presented 3 possible responses to the crisis. The first option was diplomatic contact with the Zephyrian Empire to negotiate Morrison's release. The second option was a rescue mission using special forces to infiltrate the alien fortress world where Morrison was being held. The third option was what Webb called the nuclear response. Hayes listened to each option with growing frustration. Diplomatic contact was impossible because the Zephyrians had never responded to human communications. They considered humans to be an inferior species unworthy of dialogue. A rescue mission would be suicide because the Zephyrian fortress world of Kethmora was protected by massive defense systems and located deep in enemy territory. What exactly is the nuclear response? Hayes asked. Webb hesitated before answering. Total war, Mr. President. Complete annihilation of the Zephyrian Empire and everything they have built. We have the capability to sterilize every world they control and eliminate their entire species from the galaxy. But once we start down that road, there is no going back. The room fell silent as everyone absorbed the implications of Webb's words. Humanity had never committed genocide against another intelligent species, despite having the weapons and technology to do so. Earth's leaders had always believed that peaceful coexistence was possible with alien civilizations, even hostile ones like the Zephyrians. Hayes stood up and walked to the large display showing Morrison's location on Kethmora. The cargo pilot was just a red dot on a tactical map, but he represented something much larger. He was a human being, a member of Earth's extended family, and he was suffering at the hands of creatures that viewed him as nothing more than an interesting specimen to torture and study. How many humans live in the colonies? Hayes asked. Approximately 47 million across all settled worlds, Admiral Kane replied. And how many of them would we lose if word spreads that aliens can capture and torture humans without consequences? Kane understood the question immediately. If the Zephyrians could take one human prisoner without retaliation, other alien empires might decide that humans were easy targets. The colonies were spread across hundreds of light years and could not be effectively defended against determined alien attacks. Fear would spread through human space like wildfire. We would lose them all, Kane said quietly. No one would feel safe. People would abandon the colonies and retreat to Earth. Everything we have built out there would collapse. Hayes nodded grimly. He had been president for 6 years and had always tried to find peaceful solutions to problems. But sometimes peace was not possible. Sometimes the only way to protect your people was to demonstrate that attacking them would result in consequences so terrible that no one would ever try it again. Gentlemen, ladies, Hayes said, I am activating Protocol 7. The announcement sent shockwaves through the room. Protocol 7 was a classified directive that had been written during Earth's early expansion into space, but never used. It stated that any act of aggression against human civilians by alien forces would be met with the complete destruction of the aggressor species and their civilization. Dr. Cross spoke first. Mr. President, Protocol 7 authorizes the use of biological weapons designed to target specific alien genetics. Are you prepared to commit genocide to save one man? Hayes turned to face her. Dr. Cross, Jake Morrison is not just one man. He is one of us. He represents every human who has ever left Earth to build a new life among the stars. If we abandon him, we abandon the principle that humans protect their own. And if we do that, we stop being human. Admiral Kane began coordinating with fleet commanders across human space. Within hours, every warship in the Terran Navy was being recalled from patrol duties and equipped for extended combat operations. Weapons that had never been tested in battle were loaded onto ships, and crews were briefed on missions that would determine the future of human civilization. Dr. Cross and her research team began working around the clock to develop biological agents specifically designed to target Zephyrian physiology. Using genetic samples obtained from previous encounters, they created viruses that would devastate the reptilian aliens while leaving other life forms unharmed. It was work that violated every principle of medical ethics, but it was necessary for human survival. Captain Nick Sullivan received orders to prepare his Special Forces unit for the most dangerous mission in military history. They would infiltrate Kethmara during the fleet assault and extract Morrison while the planet's defenses were being destroyed. It was essentially a suicide mission, but Sullivan and his men accepted it without question. Meanwhile, on the fortress world of Kethmara, Jake Morrison endured another day of torture and experimentation. He had no idea that his distress signal had reached Earth or that his entire species was preparing for war to bring him home. All he knew was pain, fear, and the determination to survive long enough to see his captors pay for what they had done. The Zephyrian Empire had captured one human. They were about to learn why that was the worst mistake they had ever made. The peaceful mining colonies of the Outer Rim suddenly erupted into activity as military transports descended from orbit like steelhawks. Miners put down their tools and farmers left their fields as recruitment officers spread the word that Earth needed every able-bodied human for the war effort. Within 48 hours of Protocol 7 activation, the entire human race was mobilizing for total conflict. Admiral Lisa Kane stood on the bridge of the flagship Terra's Vengeance and watched the largest fleet in human history assemble around Earth. Massive dreadnoughts hung in space like sleeping giants, while sleek destroyers darted between them in complex patrol patterns. Supply ships arrived hourly with weapons, ammunition, and the experimental technologies that had been locked away in secret military facilities for decades. The fleet grew larger each day as ships arrived from every human world. The ancient battleship Fury came from the Centauri colonies, with her hull scarred from a dozen minor conflicts with pirates and raiders. The carrier group Lightning Strike brought fighter squadrons from the industrial worlds of Vega system. Even civilian cargo haulers were pressed into service as supply vessels and troop transports. Kane counted the ships on her tactical display and felt a mixture of pride and terror at what humanity had created. 2,847 warships of every size and class floated in formation around Earth. It was enough firepower to reduce entire star systems to cosmic dust, and every weapon was aimed at the Zephyrian Empire. The centerpiece of the fleet was the experimental vessel Terra's Wrath, a ship so classified that even Kane had only learned of its existence when Protocol 7 was activated. The massive vessel carried weapons designed to crack planets open like eggs and turn entire worlds into lifeless rocks floating in space. Dr. Helen Garcia had overseen the installation of biological weapon dispensers that could sterilize a planet's surface in minutes. Dr. Garcia worked without sleep in her laboratory aboard the Terra's Wrath, creating death in liquid form. The Zephyrian genetic samples obtained from previous encounters had been studied and analyzed until she understood their biology better than they did themselves. Her team had developed 17 different viral agents, each designed to attack a specific aspect of Zephyrian physiology. The first virus attacked their respiratory system, causing their lungs to fill with fluid until they drowned in their own blood. The second targeted their nervous system, sending waves of agony through their bodies before shutting down all motor functions. The third was designed to be slow and painful, eating away at their scales and skin until they begged for death. Garcia felt sick every time she looked at her creations, but she forced herself to continue working. Jake Morrison was enduring torture on an alien world, and these weapons might be the only way to bring him home alive. She had taken an oath to preserve life when she became a doctor, but sometimes preserving one life required destroying many others. Captain Nick Sullivan trained his Special Forces unit in the cargo bays of the Terra's Wrath, preparing them for a mission that had never been attempted before. His Death's Head Battalion consisted of 48 of the most dangerous soldiers humanity had ever produced. They were experts in infiltration, assassination, and extraction operations behind enemy lines. Sullivan had studied every piece of intelligence about the Zephyrian fortress world of Kethmara. The planet was protected by orbital defense platforms, ground-based missile systems, and garrison forces numbering in the millions. Getting to Morrison would require fighting through multiple layers of alien defenses while the main fleet kept the enemy distracted. The plan was simple in concept, but nearly impossible in execution. The fleet would jump into the Kethmara system and begin a full-scale assault on the planet's defenses. While the Zephyrians were focused on the space battle, Sullivan's team would use stealth shuttles to reach the surface and locate Morrison in the research facility where he was being held. Sullivan briefed his men on what they could expect to face on Kethmara. The Zephyrians were physically stronger than humans and armed with energy weapons that could cut through most armor. Their fortress cities were built like mazes designed to confuse and trap invaders. The research facility where Morrison was held was located deep underground and protected by automated defense systems. "We go in hard and fast," Sullivan told his soldiers. "Find Morrison, extract him, and get out before the planet turns to glass. Anyone who gets left behind stays left behind. We cannot afford to lose more people trying to save people we have already lost." The men nodded grimly. They understood the mathematics of war and accepted that some of them would not be coming home. But they also understood that abandoning Morrison would mean abandoning the principle that humans never left their own behind. That principle was worth dying for. Meanwhile, across human space, entire populations prepared for the possibility that the war might not go as planned. Civilian evacuation plans were activated on worlds near Zephyrian territory. Children were taught emergency procedures in case alien raiders attacked their homes. Factory workers increased production of weapons and armor, while farmers stockpiled food supplies for extended conflicts. The transformation of human civilization was remarkable and terrifying. In less than a week, a peaceful trading society had become a war machine focused on a single goal. Every human alive understood that they were fighting for more than just Jake Morrison. They were fighting for the right to exist in a galaxy full of predators who viewed them as prey. President Daniel Hayes addressed the human race from the bridge of the Terra's Vengeance as the fleet prepared to depart for Zephyrian space. His words were broadcast to every human world and recorded for future generations to remember what their ancestors had been willing to do for family. "My fellow humans," Hayes said, "we go to war not because we seek conquest or glory, but because one of our own needs our help. Jake Morrison is a cargo pilot who dedicated his life to helping others. Now we will dedicate our lives to helping him. The Zephyrians think they can torture and kill humans without consequences. They are about to learn that they are wrong. The fleet engaged their hyperspace drives simultaneously, and 2,847 human warships vanished into that strange dimension between dimensions. They carried with them the hopes and fury of 47 million colonists and 8 billion people on Earth. When they emerged in Zephyrian space, the galaxy would witness the true nature of humanity. Behind them, Earth continued its preparations for total war. More ships were being built in orbital shipyards, while scientists developed even more terrible weapons. If the fleet failed to rescue Morrison and destroy the Zephyrian Empire, a second wave would follow, then a third, until every alien who had participated in his capture was dead. The human race had awakened from its peaceful dreams, and the galaxy would never be the same again. Jake Morrison had lost count of the days since his capture, when the Zephyrian scientists brought him to a new laboratory deep beneath the surface of Kethmora. His body was covered with scars from their experiments, and his mind felt foggy from the drugs they pumped into his system. But something inside him refused to break, no matter what they did to him. Dr. C. Thule, the lead Zephyrian researcher, studied Morrison with growing fascination. The human had endured torture that would have killed most species within hours, yet he continued to resist with a determination that defied all scientific explanation. His vital signs showed impossible resilience, and his psychological profile revealed a stubborn refusal to surrender that amazed his captors. "How are you still alive?" Thule asked in his broken human language. "Your species should be weak. Your bodies are soft, your bones are fragile, and your minds should have shattered long ago. Yet you persist. Why?" Morrison looked up at the towering reptilian scientist with eyes that still burned with defiance, despite weeks of agony. His voice was hoarse from screaming, but his words were clear. "Because I know my people are coming for me. And when they get here, you are all going to die." Thule laughed, a sound like breaking glass. "Your people are traders and farmers, scattered across dozens of worlds. We have conquered 17 star systems and enslaved millions of beings far more advanced than humans. What could your primitive species possibly do against the might of the Zephyrian Empire?" Morrison smiled through his pain. "You are about to find out?" The conversation was interrupted by alarms echoing through the research facility. Emergency lights bathed the corridors in red as automated systems announced the detection of massive hyperspace signatures at the edge of the Kethmora system. Thule activated a communication link to the surface and listened in growing disbelief to the reports flooding in from Zephyrian scouts. 2,800 human warships had emerged from hyperspace in perfect formation. The fleet was larger than anything the Zephyrians had ever assembled, and their ships carried weapon signatures that made no sense according to alien understanding of human technology. This was not a rescue mission or a diplomatic protest. This was an invasion force designed to conquer worlds. Commander Vextal rushed to the command center of the orbital defense station and stared at the tactical display showing the approaching human fleet. He had expected perhaps a dozen ships carrying diplomats or a small rescue force trying to negotiate for the human prisoner. Instead, he faced the largest military armada in recorded galactic history. "Impossible," Vextal muttered. "Humans do not have this many warships. Our intelligence reports indicate they possess no more than 300 vessels suitable for military operations. Where did they get nearly 3,000 ships?" His aide, a young Zephyrian officer named Kexival, pulled up the latest intelligence files on human military capabilities. The data showed exactly what Vextal remembered. Humans were peaceful traders with minimal military forces spread across their colonies. Their largest warships were converted cargo vessels with basic defensive systems. "Sir," Kexaval said nervously, "the intelligence data appears to be incorrect. The ships approaching our system are displaying weapon signatures consistent with planet-killing dreadnoughts. Some of these vessels are larger than our own capital ships." Vextal studied the sensor readings and felt something he had not experienced in his 40 years of military service: fear. The human fleet was not behaving like any enemy force he had encountered before. There were no demands for surrender, no attempts at communication, and no preliminary positioning for defensive operations. The humans were approaching at maximum speed, with all weapon systems powered and ready for immediate combat. Emperor Korthval received the reports from Kethmora in his throne room on the imperial capital world of SciFiPrime. He had ruled the empire for 60 years and had never faced a military threat that his forces could not easily crush. The news of a massive human fleet approaching one of his fortress worlds seemed impossible to believe. Humans are weak creatures suitable only for slavery and experimentation, Korthval declared to his assembled generals. This must be some kind of deception or desperation attack. A few hundred ships attempting to appear as thousands through electronic warfare and holographic projections. General Vekmer, the Empire's supreme military commander, reviewed the sensor data and shook his massive reptilian head. "My lord, our deep space monitoring stations confirmed the presence of nearly 3,000 human vessels. The energy signatures are consistent with genuine warships, not projections or decoys. This is a real invasion force." Korthval rose from his throne in anger. "Then we will destroy them, as we have destroyed every other species that dared to challenge our authority. Send the third battle fleet to intercept these humans and teach them why the galaxy fears the Zephyrian Empire." Vekmer hesitated before responding. "My lord, the third battle fleet consists of only 400 ships. The humans outnumber us 7-1. Perhaps we should consider a diplomatic solution to this crisis." "Diplomacy is for equals," Korthval snarled. "Humans are insects to be crushed beneath our claws. Send the third fleet immediately and show these creatures the price of defying us." Back on Kethmora, Morrison listened to the chaos erupting throughout the research facility as Zephyrian. Scientists and guards tried to understand what was happening. Through his cell's ventilation system, he could hear conversations in the alien language he had begun to recognize after weeks of captivity. The words he understood most clearly were humans, fleet, and impossible. Seekthel returned to Morrison's cell with several armed guards and a portable communication device. "Your people have made a serious mistake," the scientist said. "They have sent ships to attack a fortress world protected by the most advanced defense systems in the galaxy. We will destroy their fleet, and then we will make you watch as we broadcast their deaths across human space." Morrison looked at the communication device and smiled. "You still do not understand what you are facing. You took one human prisoner and thought there would be no consequences. But humans do not abandon their own. Every person on every human world knows what you did to me, and they sent their answer." "What answer?" Seekthal demanded. "Total war," Morrison replied. "Not conquest, not negotiation, not surrender. Complete annihilation of everything you have built and everyone you have ever been. You wanted to study human nature, so let me teach you something about my species. We are peaceful by choice, not because we are weak. And when you threaten our family, we stop being peaceful." The facility shook as the first human weapons struck the planetary defense grid. Energy beams that could pierce through a moon's core lanced down from orbit and began systematically destroying every military installation on Kethmora. The invasion had begun, and Morrison knew that his people had not come to negotiate or rescue him quietly. They had come to make sure that no alien species would ever again think that capturing a human was worth the risk. The Zephyrian Third Battle Fleet emerged from hyperspace, expecting to face a desperate rescue mission by inferior humans. Instead, they found themselves surrounded by the largest war fleet in galactic history. Admiral Lisa Kane did not bother with warnings or demands for surrender. The time for words had ended the moment they captured. Jake Morrison. The first wave of human weapons fire lit up space like a newborn star. Energy beams designed to crack planetary crusts tore through Zephyrian shields as if they were made of paper. The aliens had built their ships to fight enemies who followed the traditional rules of space warfare. Humans had built their weapons to kill everything that threatened their family. Commander Vextal watched in horror as his capital ship's shields collapsed under the concentrated fire of 50 human dreadnoughts. His crew scrambled to return fire, but their energy weapons barely scratched the human armor plating. The aliens had designed their ships for conquest and intimidation. Humans had designed theirs to survive nuclear wars and planet-killing impacts. Within 12 minutes, the entire Zephyrian Third Battle Fleet was reduced to floating debris and emergency escape pods. The human fleet did not slow down or attempt to rescue survivors. They had come to Kethmara for one purpose, and alien lives meant nothing compared to bringing Jake Morrison home. Captain Nick Sullivan felt his stealth shuttle shake as it passed through the debris field of destroyed Zephyrian ships. His death's head battalion was packed into 3 small vessels, designed to avoid detection, while the main fleet provided a very loud distraction. The orbital bombardment had begun, and the planet's surface defense systems were being systematically destroyed by weapons that turned mountains into glass. Sullivan's team reached the surface of Kethmara as human warships continued their devastating attack from orbit. The fortress cities that had taken the Zephyrian centuries to build were being reduced to rubble in minutes. Energy beams from the Terra's wrath carved through the planet's crust like a hot knife through butter, exposing the underground research facilities where Morrison was being held. The 48 soldiers of Death's head battalion moved through the burning ruins of the nearest Zephyrian city with deadly efficiency. Their armor was designed to operate in environments where the air itself was poisonous, and their weapons could punch through alien fortifications like they were made of sand. They had trained for this mission every day since Protocol 7 was activated. Sullivan followed the intelligence data downloaded from captured Zephyrian computers during previous encounters. The research facility was located 3 kilometers beneath the surface, connected to the city above by a series of transport tubes and emergency shafts. Getting there would require fighting through automated defense systems and whatever Zephyrian soldiers had survived the orbital bombardment. Meanwhile, in the depths of the research facility, Jake Morrison felt the entire complex shake as human weapons struck the surface above. Emergency power flickered on and off, while alien voices screamed orders in their harsh language. He could hear explosions getting closer and knew that his people had finally arrived. Dr. Sekthul rushed into Morrison's cell with a group of panicked Zephyrian guards. The scientist's scales were pale with terror as he realized that his species had made a catastrophic mistake. The humans were not trying to rescue their prisoner quietly. They were destroying everything on the planet to get to him. "Your people are insane," Sekthul shouted over the sound of collapsing tunnels. "They are killing millions of civilians to save one worthless cargo pilot. This is not warfare. This is genocide." Morrison looked at his captor with eyes that burned with satisfaction. "Now you understand what you unleashed when you took me prisoner. Humans do not negotiate with creatures who torture our family. We eliminate them completely so they can never threaten us again." The facility shook violently as Sullivan's team reached the outer defense perimeter. Human soldiers moved through the underground complex like death itself, their weapons cutting down alien defenders with ruthless precision. They had no time for mercy or hesitation. Every second they delayed meant more risk that Morrison might be killed by his captors. Sullivan himself led the final assault on the research level where Morrison was held. His team used shaped charges to blow through the reinforced doors, while energy weapons melted the automated gun turrets that tried to stop them. The Zephyrian guards who survived the initial breach surrendered immediately when they saw the human soldiers advancing through the smoke. Morrison heard human voices calling his name and felt tears streaming down his face for the first time since his capture. He had known his people would come for him, but seeing Sullivan's armored figure appear in his cell doorway was the most beautiful sight he had ever witnessed. The soldier quickly cut through his restraints and helped him stand on legs weakened by weeks of torture. "Jake Morrison?" Sullivan asked. "That's me," Morrison replied, his voice barely a whisper. "Captain Nick Sullivan, Death's Head Battalion. We're here to take you home." As Sullivan's team extracted Morrison from the research facility, Dr. Helen Garcia activated the biological weapons aboard the Terra's Wrath. 17 different viral agents, designed specifically to target Zephyrian genetics, were released into the planet's atmosphere. The viruses spread with terrifying speed, carried by the winds created by the orbital bombardment. The biological weapons reached every Zephyrian world simultaneously, delivered by human ships that had been positioned throughout the Empire during the chaos of the Kethmara assault. Within 72 hours, the entire Zephyrian species began dying from diseases that attacked their bodies at the cellular level. Their advanced medical technology was useless against viruses designed by humans who understood their genetics better than they did. Emperor Korthvul died in his throne room on SciFiPrime, his scaled skin dissolving as the human-made virus consumed his body from within. His last thoughts were of regret that his empire had ever encountered the cargo ship New Horizon. The Zephyrians had conquered 17 star systems and enslaved millions of beings, but they had never faced an enemy willing to commit total genocide for a single individual. Morrison recovered aboard the flagship Terra's Vengeance, while the human fleet completed its mission of absolute destruction. President Daniel Hayes personally welcomed him home and apologized that it had taken so long to find him. Morrison looked around at the thousands of human soldiers and sailors who had risked everything to save him and felt overwhelmed by their loyalty. The final phase of the operation was the most terrifying display of human power the galaxy had ever witnessed. Planet-killing weapons reduced every Zephyrian world to lifeless rock floating in space. Their great cities, their art, their history, and their entire civilization vanished in nuclear fire that could be seen from neighboring star systems. When the destruction was complete, President Hayes broadcast a message to every intelligent species in the galaxy. The transmission was sent through quantum relay networks and translated into thousands of alien languages. The message was simple and would be remembered for generations across the stars. This is President Daniel Hayes of the Terran Republic, speaking to all civilizations within range of this transmission. The Zephyrian Empire has been completely destroyed in retaliation for the capture and torture of a single human citizen. We took no pleasure in the extinction of their species, but we will not hesitate to repeat this action against any civilization that threatens human lives. We are few in number compared to the great galactic empires, but we are many in fury. Touch one of us and face all of us. Harm our family, and we will erase you from existence. This is not a threat or a warning. This is a promise from the human race to the galaxy. We protect our own. The message ended with the coordinates of every human world and an invitation for peaceful contact with species interested in trade and diplomacy. But every alien civilization that received the transmission understood the underlying message. Humans had just demonstrated that they were willing to commit genocide to protect a single cargo pilot. No one would ever again mistake their peaceful nature for weakness. Jake Morrison returned to his route between Earth and the outer colonies carrying supplies to families who needed them. But now he flew through space, protected by the knowledge that his entire species would go to war to bring him home. The galaxy had learned what Morrison always knew. Humans never abandon their own, no matter the cost.